For over 3 billion years, Earth's life remained so basic that it would hardly seem alive to us today. The seas teemed with single-celled creatures like bacteria and archaea, floating aimlessly in the currents, unseen by any observer. The ocean bottom lay covered in microbial mats, dense blankets of cyanobacteria spreading across shallow areas like vast emerald coverings, soaking up sunlight and steadily producing oxygen in an unchanging cycle that had lasted through countless ages. No animals stirred the waters, only the soft sway of tides. No vision, no protective casings, no hunters prowling the depths. Life flourished in abundance, yet it felt repetitive, like a global ecosystem cultivated by tiny, unseen workers, oblivious to the intricate wonders their lineage would later produce. This defined the planet for most of its existence, a realm where evolution crept forward at an ice age tempo, with shifts piling up so gradually that 1 million years could slip by almost unchanged. Earth pulsed with vitality, even prospered, but it lingered in biological suspension, as if existence had settled into a stable balance, with no urge to evolve further. Had you strolled those primordial coastlines, now eroded to powder and reshaped into towering peaks, you might have concluded this simplicity was life's permanent state. Then, around 541 million years ago, a shift occurred. Over about 20 million years, a time frame that feels eternal to humans but amounts to a mere instant in geologic scales. The oceans transformed in ways so profound that experts continue debating their full causes. The fossil evidence, once limited to faint traces of soft-bodied forms, burst forth with astonishing variety. Hard-shelled beings emerged, their forms shielded by calcium carbonate armor. Trilobites, arthropods featuring jointed bodies and multifaceted eyes packed with hundreds of tiny facets, started scuttling over the seabed. Hunters appeared too, some growing to over 1 meter long, equipped with keen eyesight and clutching limbs capable of ripping into victims. The earliest chordates, modest swimmers bearing a stiffening rod along their spines, entered the open water, laying the groundwork for all future vertebrates, from fish and amphibians to reptiles, mammals, and ultimately, humanity. What we term the Cambrian explosion wasn't a drawn-out process. It defied the gradual build-up Charles Darwin envisioned in his concept of evolution via natural selection. Instead, it marked a surge of intricacy, akin to a biologic genesis, that spawned nearly all the core animal architectures still visible today. And it unfolded with such relative swiftness measured against deep time benchmarks that it appeared to challenge evolution's foundational ideas. Darwin recognized this dilemma sharply, viewing it as one of the most serious critiques of his ideas. If species evolved via endless minor tweaks over immense periods, why did fossils reveal such abrupt complexity? What happened to the bridging forms, the midway stages etched into stone? For more than 100 years, fossil experts hunted for explanations. They dug up ancient deposits in isolated global spots where old seabeds had risen into ranges and been bared by weathering. They refined methods to probe the makeup of vintage sediments, tracking oxygen concentrations and carbon signatures to revive the Cambrian Ocean's setting. They delved into contemporary animal genomes for hints on the debut of pivotal traits, and bit by bit, through meticulous effort, a clearer image took shape. The Cambrian explosion stemmed from no mere fluke or heavenly chance. It arose from an ideal blend of factors, a mix of ecological shifts, adaptive breakthroughs, and survival demands that had simmered for hundreds of millions of years. Earth had been setting the stage, gathering the elements, and once they converged, life grasped the chance with an inventiveness and velocity unmatched in history. In this exploration, we'll delve into that pivotal era. We'll follow the clues locked in stones enduring 500 million years, scrutinize fossils that vividly portray the bizarre and marvelous inhabitants of Cambrian waters, and assemble the circumstances that enabled this burst of life. We'll explore the increasing oxygen concentrations in the atmosphere, the shifting ocean chemistry that enabled animals to develop shells and skeletons for the very first time, and the intense predator-prey competition that spurred evolutionary breakthroughs at an unprecedented speed. We'll encounter trilobites and anomalocaris, the small chordates and the peculiar soft-bodied organisms that resisted straightforward categorization. Ultimately, we'll grasp why this pivotal era in Earth's past, this 20-million-year span, holds such deep significance for all that followed, including humanity itself. Indeed, every intricate animal existing today links its ancestry directly to the Cambrian. From ocean-dwelling fish and airborne insects to terrestrial mammals, all stem from the beings that arose amid this burst of life. The foundational designs that took shape back then, the core templates for constructing creatures with vision, appendages, and neural networks, have undergone tweaks and adaptations across the subsequent 500 million years. Yet they've never been wholly redesigned. The Cambrian marked not merely the dawn of variety in life forms, but the emergence of complexity altogether, the instant when existence evolved from basic to remarkable. To appreciate the sheer magnitude of the Cambrian explosion, we must first examine its prelude. That means venturing deeper into the past, to the Ediacaran period, an age teeming with life yet utterly alien to contemporary sensibilities. Spanning approximately 635 to 541 million years ago, the Ediacaran closed out a protracted phase where organisms clung to fundamental simplicity. Far from barren, those ancient seas brimmed with inhabitants that would strike modern observers as utterly otherworldly. Their fossils, upon initial unearthing, baffled researchers for generations, defying easy interpretation. Dubbed the Ediacaran Biota, these entities were mostly soft-bodied forms dwelling on or slightly above the ocean bottom, adhering to anatomical principles, long vanished from the natural world. Numerous specimens appeared flattened, nearly two-dimensional, featuring quilted or divided exteriors, reminiscent of inflated cushions or intricate designs etched into sediment. Take Dickinsonia, for instance. It could stretch to almost a meter long, all without a discernible mouth, digestive tract, or any recognizable internal structures. Meanwhile, forms like Charnia resembled leafy fronds or ferns, rooted to the seabed and reaching into the currents overhead. Animal in nature, though not botanical. These beings occupied a realm devoid of predators, a circumstance that molded their every trait. Shells offered no advantage, nor did swift movement, sharp senses, or vigilance against threats, since predation as we know it was absent. Microbial mats, those dense bacterial layers, chiefly from cyanobacteria that had blanketed the globe for eons, reigned over the Ediacaran seafloor. The era's fauna coexisted symbiotically with these mats, likely grazing on them or osmotically drawing in sustenance via their broad pancake-like forms. It formed a serene domain, almost idyllic in its straightforwardness, where biological cycles unfolded predictably and rivalry manifested in gentle, indirect ways. Lacking pursuit, ambush, or fierce contests for existence, The Ediacaran embodied a balanced ecosystem, a steady configuration that could have persisted forever were it not for the subtle transformations brewing unseen. Those shifts had already begun, albeit unfolding over vast timescales before reaching fruition. Oxygen buildup in the air and seas had progressed gradually during the late Proterozoic, fueled by cyanobacterial photosynthesis and the sequestration of organic matter in ocean deposits. This gradual, relentless accumulation hadn't attained today's abundance, but it neared a vital tipping point, one that would unlock possibilities for novel life strategies. Concurrently, seawater composition altered in nuanced yet crucial fashions. Calcium levels rose, propelled by erosion of land masses and mineral deliveries from streams and deep-sea vents. This calcium would become indispensable for the innovations ahead, supplying the vital ingredient that soon-to-emerge animals would harness in groundbreaking manners. Near the close of the Ediacaran period, about 550 million years ago, the initial signs of an impending shift started showing up in the fossil evidence. Tiny tubular creatures known as Cloudina began constructing outer shells from calcium carbonate, basic defensive forms that signaled the dawn of biomineralization, the method where organisms integrate minerals into their structures. These primitive shells were basic compared to those that followed, essentially layered cones or cylinders. Yet they signified a groundbreaking adaptation, a fresh approach to enduring that many other groups would soon embrace and improve. Around that era, signs of activity emerged in the deposits, including trails and tunnels made by slender worm-like beings starting to probe under the bacterial layers, digging into the silt for nourishment or refuge. Initially, these tunnels were mere millimeters deep, but they heralded a shift that would ultimately reshape ocean habitats. The Ediacaran realm was evolving, albeit so slowly that a contemporary witness might have overlooked it. Oxygen concentrations kept rising alongside the steady buildup of calcium in the seas. With these geochemical shifts building up, the earliest basic hunters started to emerge. Modest organisms that consumed plentiful microbes and possibly one another, bringing the idea of hunting into habitats untouched by it previously. The once steady weather started to vary as the divide between the Ediacaran and Cambrian neared. Water levels in the oceans ebbed and flowed. Circulation patterns altered, blending deep-sea nutrients into the near-shore zones where the bulk of organisms dwelled. The bacterial films that had ruled the ocean floor for eons started fragmenting as digging animals stirred the bottom and disturbed their form. Such circumstances prepared the groundwork for the Cambrian explosion, a planet teetering on change, where established patterns were starting to crumble and fresh opportunities were unfolding. The Ediacaran organisms, those odd cushioned forms that had flourished without threats from predators, started fading and vanishing, ill-equipped for an environment growing more intricate, rivalrous, and risky. The bacterial films that had offered a reliable base for existence were yielding to a livelier, multi-layered space where creatures could tunnel beneath and navigate overhead. Tapping into novel habitats that were entirely new, the extended phase of uncomplicated existence was drawing to a close, and Earth was poised for a burst of creativity unmatched in its past or future. As we passed that threshold, shifting from the Ediacaran to the opening phases of the Cambrian, the anticipation mounts, conveying the feeling that something monumental is imminent. All the elements are assembled, the oxygen, the calcium, the genetic resources, enabling animals to form elaborate forms, the environmental forces spurring swift development. The scene is prepared, the players poised off stage, and the drape is ready to lift on one of the grandest spectacles in life's chronicle. Clues to the Cambrian explosion draw from diverse origins. From dispersed remains unearthed in global stone formations, from molecular traces held in age-old deposits, from the hereditary links among today's animals that let us follow their ancestry back through the ages. Yet to genuinely encounter the Cambrian, to confront the beings that arose in this surge and grasp their surroundings, one location stands out above the rest. Elevated in the Canadian Rockies within British Columbia's Yoho National Park lies a slender stratum of stone that captured a slice of ancient history with remarkable precision, reshaping our view of primitive animal evolution. This is the Burgess Shale, and its unearthing marks one of the pivotal milestones in paleontology's timeline. The tale of the Burgess Shale kicks off on a warm, late summer afternoon in August 1909, as American paleontologist Charles Doolittle Walcott rode horseback through the peaks close to Field, British Columbia. Walcott was already a prominent figure in science, serving as the Smithsonian Institution's secretary, and he had devoted years to examining Cambrian remains from sites across North America. That afternoon, while descending a mountain path with his wife, one of their horses supposedly kicked loose a slab of shale that cracked apart to expose the finely preserved fossil of a soft-bodied organism. The details of how this find occurred have grown more dramatic with time, and the tale of the horse's hoof might well be legend. But the key point is that Walcott instantly knew he'd uncovered something remarkable. In the summers that followed, between 1910 and 1924, he kept coming back to the location, digging at a quarry perched high on the flanks of the ridge now known as Fossil Ridge. He labored under grueling circumstances at more than 2,300 meters above sea level, where sudden fierce weather could strike, and the fieldwork window spanned just a handful of months annually. Even so, Walcott and his crew pulled out over 65,000 specimens from the Burgess Shale, meticulously packing each one and transporting them to Washington, D.C., for cataloging and safekeeping in the Smithsonian's archives. The site Walcott unearthed was a treasure trove of unparalleled preservation, where not only the tough exoskeletons and bones of long-ago creatures endured, but their delicate parts too, the muscles, gills, and intestines that typically vanish in days after death and never show up in the rock record. The Burgess Shale dates to about 508 million years ago, smack in the Cambrian era's midpoint, and the rare, exacting conditions there enabled the retention of those soft features. These organisms inhabited a gentle coastal sea, at the foot of a towering submerged escarpment along the old continent's edge, where the ocean floor plunged into profound depths, often stirred by tempests or tremors. Torrents of subaqueous sediment would tumble off that sheer face, sweeping up shallow water life and whisking it swiftly into the oxygen-scarce abyss underneath. Devoid of oxygen, the microbes that usually break down organic matter couldn't thrive, and the silt that smothered the creatures shielded them from predators and physical disturbance. As layers of deposit built up over eons atop these entombed forms, the weight turned the silt to shale, while the animals' yielding tissues were gradually supplanted, atom for atom, by minerals, yielding fossils that capture even cellular intricacies. Gazing at a Burgess Shale specimen in a display or image, the sheer fidelity hits you right away. There are the jointed forms of arthropods, the plume-like gills for drawing in oxygen, multifaceted compound eyes, and traces of a hunter's final feast inside its belly. These aren't blurry outlines or scattered bits. They're whole beings captured eternally, letting us envision not merely their appearance, but their behaviors, diets, and swimming styles. The Burgess Shale cracked open a portal to the Cambrian oceans, unveiling a realm vastly weirder and richer in variety than scholars ever dreamed. From the myriad samples Walcott gathered, some beasts emerged as freakishly formed oddities, sparking deep inquiries into the roots of animal development. Ruling as the top hunter in those primordial waters was a Nomalocaris, a name translating to odd shrimp. It took scientists years to piece together that this represented one coherent beast, not assorted misidentified fragments. Stretching to a full meter, giant for its epoch, Nomalocaris pursued quarry with a finesse that stunned experts once its structure clicked. It had a round orifice ringed by plates that could constrict like a camera shutter, forward limbs for seizing and handling victims, and hefty eyes on stems enabling sharp detection of motion in the currents. Far from a crude stab at carnivory, this was a polished assassin, demanding intricate senses and seamless locomotion. Proof that the Cambrian's predator-prey escalation had already forged elite slayers. Just as outlandish was Opabinia, an entity so alien that its 1972 debut at a scholarly gathering supposedly drew chuckles from the crowd, who couldn't fathom such a being had truly roamed. Opabinia featured an array of 5 eyes positioned along the upper surface of its head, along with a slender, bendy trunk protruding from the front of its form and ending in gripping pincers, giving it the vibe of a prop straight out of a sci-fi movie. Still, the preserved remains were sharp and unmistakable, confirming beyond question that this oddity had truly inhabited and perished in the ancient Cambrian waters. Hallucigenia got its moniker from its surreal, mind-bending look, complete with backward spines and what seemed like tentacles or limbs dangling from below. Paleontologists at first pieced it together, inverted, an error that lingered for quite some time before superior finds revealed the correct setup. The array of anatomical designs stretched well past these famous weirdos. Wewaxia, armored in tough scales and prickles, evoked a hybrid of mollusk and annelid worm, resisting straightforward categorization and hinting that the Cambrian oceans brimmed with trial-and-error forms that nature would later scrap. Morella, dubbed the lace crab, dominated the Burgess Shale finds as the most common relic, a tiny arthropod, sporting intricate head plates and dangling limbs that sifted nutrients from the currents as it glided along. Of greatest relevance to our evolutionary tale might be Pikaia, a modest swimmer, just a few centimeters in length, propelling itself through the seas via rippling waves of its broad body. This little organism boasted a notochord, a supple rod along its spine that bolstered its musculature and enabled smoother propulsion, marking it as one of the first recognized chordates and slotting it into our direct ancestral line. A modest start for the phylum that would spawn fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and eventually, people. The Burgess Shale unveiled a Cambrian realm, rich not only in species count but in the breadth of morphologies and survival tactics that had taken shape. Grazers and hunters mingled with burrowers and drifters, while bottom crawlers cohabited with midwater floaters. The web of interactions in those prehistoric oceans rivaled today's seas, boasting layered food chains, intricate predator-prey dynamics, and diverse tricks for foraging, evasion, and breeding. Far from a crude setup of basic life forms groping toward sophistication, this was a refined biosphere, humming with efficiency and depth, guided by the timeless rules of existence. That said, the Burgess Shale captured just the midpoint of the Cambrian burst. These beings from around 508 million years back had arrived after the upheaval was already rolling, with core breakthroughs long in place. To catch the surge at its dawn, to observe the spark of this shift firsthand, we must venture deeper into the past and across continents to yet another stunning deposit, one that outdates the Burgess by over 10 million years and peers even nearer to the dawn of animal intricacy. For years, the Burgess Shale served as the key portal to this lost era, our fullest archive of primordial fauna, from about 508 million years ago, when the bloom was midway and thriving habitats were set. But experts realized it was merely one chapter, a view post-dating many pivotal shifts. Grasping the Cambrian explosion's true kickoff, the instant when elaboration burst forth, demanded older traces, layers recording the handover from Ediacaran simplicity to the elaborate fauna that ruled the Cambrian deeps. That breakthrough arrived in 1984, far across the globe in China's Yunnan province. There, a local fossil hunter named Hu Xiangguang scanned strata near the village of Chengjiang and uncovered a marvel. The formations he probed, known geologically as the Maotian Shan Shales, held specimens mirroring the Burgess Shale's superb fidelity, delicate organs and fine features etched in exquisite clarity. Yet these were far more ancient, from roughly 520 million years prior, extending the timeline of advanced animal forms by over a decade in millions, and anchoring it nearer the Cambrian's outset. What Hu had unearthed wasn't simply a new dig site, but a direct view into the explosion's opening acts. This era marked a period where the groundbreaking developments shaping animal existence were novel and tentative. Dubbed the Chengjiang Fossil Assemblage, these deposits have uncovered an impressive array of fossils, documenting over 196 species spanning at least 16 phyla and encompassing nearly all principal animal clades from the early Cambrian. The exceptional fidelity of preservation in Chengjiang equals and occasionally exceeds that of the Burgess Shale, with specimens preserving not only outer forms but also inner features like digestive tracts, neural elements, and even, in exceptional instances, remnants of the creature's brains. Advanced tools such as micro-CT scans have enabled scientists to explore these relics in full 3D without harm, uncovering intricacies inaccessible just decades prior. Such advances have transformed our grasp of the swift rise in animal intricacy and the advanced nature of these primordial ocean habitats. Chengjiang stands out not merely for its antiquity or exceptional conservation, but because it captures organisms embodying live evolutionary trials. These beings were testing varied approaches to thriving amid the intensifying rivalries of this emergent world. Key finds in Chengjiang include nascent chordates, the forebears of our own phylum, Hycoichthys and Milocunmingia, unearthed from these layers, rank among the first recognized proto-vertebrates resembling fish. Tiny swimmers, merely centimeters in length, that propelled themselves via segmental muscle bands aligned with a notochord. Equipped with gills to draw oxygen from seawater, frontal sensory clusters, and rudimentary yet effective internal setups, these forms lay the groundwork for the vertebrate blueprint, refined across eons, one shared by humans today. Their emergence in Chengjiang so soon after the Cambrian's onset, underscores the explosive pace of diversification. Far from primitive, these entities boasted elaborate structures, dedicated organs, and intricate actions, achieved in just 20 million years from the Cambrian start, a duration that strains credulity for deriving such elaboration from the preceding Ediacaran simplicity. The Chengjiang Biota illustrates that the Cambrian burst wasn't a leisurely progression across tens of millions of years, but an abrupt surge of creativity, as if existence had awaited a cue or catalyst to unleash the latent potentials stifled through prior epochs when elaboration proved elusive. Outside chordates, Chengjiang archives a stunning range of arthropods, destined to dominate as the era's most prolific and abundant marine dwellers. These primordial arthropods exhibit wild experimentation in morphology, with taxa varying in segment counts, limb configurations, and methods for foraging and movement. Certain ones were hunters armed with seizing pincers and prominent eyes. Others sifted plankton via bristle-fringed limbs, while more foraged as bottom dwellers, scavenging refuse and carcasses. Such variety indicates that by 520 million years ago, the core traffic positions defining ocean ecosystems through geologic time were already in place, with fauna filling every niche and vying for sustenance in manners that spurred ongoing adaptation and enhancement. Arguably, the most striking revelation from Chengjiang fossils concerns the development of neural and perceptual systems. In 2012, analysis of Fuxianhuia protensa, an arthropod from these strata, yielded traces of its brain and ventral nerve cords, mineralized alongside the exoskeleton, as the most ancient preserved neural material. It reveals that Cambrian fauna already wielded intricate wiring to handle inputs and orchestrate advanced actions. Moreover, the prevalence of sizable, refined eyes in numerous Chengjiang specimens highlights vision's early primacy, aiding in environmental traversal, prey detection, and threat evasion. The Chengjiang locality also captures traces of entire food chains, featuring hunters, victims, suspension feeders, and even music breakdown organisms, all captured within the fossil collection. It's this level of biological intricacy that renders the Cambrian burst so extraordinary. The event wasn't merely about the emergence of advanced creatures. Rather, these organisms swiftly assembled into operational communities, boasting various feeding tiers and elaborate interconnections among kinds. The Chengjiang realm wasn't some intermediary stage or a rudimentary trial still gaining stability. Instead, it formed a mature seafloor network, guided by the core dynamics that still shape marine existence now, and this arose just around 20 million years into the Cambrian period. Such findings imply that as soon as the catalyst for elaboration kicked in and environmental factors converged to enable creature variation and adaptation, the developments accelerated astonishingly, occupying every possible role and locking in structures that endured for hundreds of millions of years. Revelations from Chengjiang have reshaped our grasp of the Cambrian surge, shifting its timeline earlier and revealing that the swift spread of animal forms was even more intense and abrupt than experts once thought. Remains from these Chinese layers reveal that by 520 million years ago, the planet had undergone a profound shift. The flat, planar world of the Ediacaran gave way to a voluminous sea, teeming with cruising hunters, digging life forms, and tangled species engagements. The scene was prepared, the cast assembled, and the saga of creature existence was underway in full force. Yet despite the insights from the Burgess Shale and Chengjiang into Cambrian conditions, uncertainties linger. The biggest of these probes, not the events themselves, but their mechanisms. Which advancements sparked this outburst? Which developmental leaps enabled creatures to abruptly acquire the traits marking elaborate biology? Traits such as vision organs, protective casings, and advanced neural setups. To tackle these, we must explore a pivotal Cambrian advancement, one that would alter earthly biology eternally and ignite a competitive spiral, propelling change for the ensuing 500 million years. Of all the breakthroughs during the Cambrian outburst, scant few influence life's path as deeply as the rise of sight, the capacity to perceive by capturing light-based cues from surroundings, utterly revolutionized survival for Cambrian ocean dwellers. Prior to visual organs, seafloor life relied mostly on tactile and molecular detection, with beings sensing sustenance or hazards only upon physical proximity, or when drifting particles provoked a reaction. This created a realm of narrow perception, where perils could stealthily close in from all sides and foraging demanded either passive waiting for nearby drift or aimless probing through the currents. Visual evolution upended it all, adding a fresh layer of perception that let creatures spot threats from afar, pursue active quarry, and maneuver through intricate volumetric spaces accurately. The preserved record indicates that visual organs surged into being with astonishing haste in the Cambrian's dawn, not as basic photoreceptive patches that slowly refined across eons, but as intricate apparatuses apparently operational right from their initial fossil traces. Trilobites, the widespread joint-legged icons that ruled Cambrian waters for eons, sported multifaceted visual arrays from their debut, near 521 million years ago. And these weren't crude forerunners, but advanced visual apparatuses, packing hundreds or thousands of distinct facets. Every one a meticulously formed calcite gem, channeling rays to light-capturing cells below. The abrupt advent of such elaborate setups puzzled Darwin and still captivates biologists now, not for implying anything mystical or insoluble, but for illustrating how swiftly selection can proceed under intense adaptive demands and with adequate building blocks present. The trilobite visual organ stands as one of selection's most graceful answers to the sight dilemma. Distinct from the organic lenses of protein and chitin in today's joint-leggeds, trilobites built theirs from calcite, a mineral variant of calcium carbonate, boasting light-bending traits ideal for concentration. In the compound eyes of trilobites, every lens consisted of a solitary crystal, carefully aligned to exploit the inherent refractive qualities of calcite. These lenses formed an array across a domed surface, providing the creature with an expansive visual range to spot motion over a vast swath of its environment. The most advanced examples, from the trilobite species thriving in the Ordovician and Devonian eras, featured as many as 15,000 separate lenses, each meticulously crafted and placed to build a cohesive picture. The ingenuity of this visual setup was remarkable, arriving at innovations that human scientists wouldn't uncover until the 17th century. Certain trilobites even evolved a doublet lens configuration, in which each ommatidium housed a pair of lenses with varying refractive indexes, collaborating to minimize spherical aberration. The issue where peripheral light rays converge differently from central ones. This approach mirrored the concepts outlined by René Descartes and Christian Huygens in their optical studies. though trilobites employed it some 400 million years ahead of humanity's grasp of the underlying math. That natural selection could craft such intricate visual mechanisms via unguided trial and error, favoring mutations that offered even minor edges in spotting meals or dodging threats, underscores evolution's capacity to foster elaborate structures under favorable circumstances. Yet trilobites weren't alone in pioneering sight amid the Cambrian seas. The top hunter Anomalocaris, that meter-long swimmer from the Burgess Shale we've discussed, sported compound eyes potentially surpassing those of trilobites, with fossils revealing structures large enough for up to 30,000 lenses. Positioned on movable stalks, these eyes let Anomalocaris follow targets during pursuits, highlighting the sensory escalation gripping the mid-Cambrian world. Specimens unearthed in South Australia preserve these eyes in full three-dimensional detail, enabling scientists to scrutinize their anatomy and verify their role in generating sharp visuals, distinguishing forms and pursuing motion through the depths, beyond mere light detection. The rise of eyesight sparked what experts term an evolutionary arms race, a cycle of escalation where one lineage's visual upgrades compelled rivals to adapt in kind. As vision emerged, potential victims endured strong pressures to acquire eyes of their own or devise alternative protections against sighted hunters. Predators, meanwhile, had to sharpen their gaze to match ever-slicker escapes, spurring swift advances in perception, anatomy, and tactics that fueled the Cambrian's burst of variety. Enhanced vision streamlined predation, elevating its role in molding communities and promoting traits like armor, protrusions, underground habits, and the array of shields seen in Cambrian remains. Vision's influence reached further, reshaping how species interacted by enabling alliances, rivalries, and signaling. Creatures able to observe one another could identify partners, size up competitors, and synchronize collective actions, opportunities absent in a sightless realm. Evidence from eye morphology hints that select Cambrian fauna might have discerned colors, opening doors to displays like vivid markings for courtship or cautionary hues against attackers. What was once a hidden three-dimensional sea transformed into a vibrant, informative vista, ripe for interpretation and response. The swift emergence of elaborate eyes in this period implies that the foundational genetic and growth frameworks for such organs already existed in early Cambrian forebears poised for elaboration. Insights from contemporary evo-devo studies reveal shared regulatory genes, notably PAC6, directing eye formation from bugs and mollusks to vertebrates, pointing to an ancestral genetic foundation ready for eyes. The Cambrian period didn't mark the creation of sight out of nothing. Instead, it involved triggering and refining pre-existing genetic pathways in animals, spurred by emerging environmental demands. As ocean conditions during that era promoted the development of eyes, various animal branches separately tweaked their common hereditary blueprint to form sight organs tailored to their unique habitats and habits. Finding advanced eyes in the oldest Cambrian remains reveals key insights into the explosion's character. It wasn't a drawn-out phase of trial and error, with basic shapes evolving into intricate ones across vast time scales. Rather, the Cambrian era featured swift breakthroughs, where elaborate traits emerged abruptly in geologic terms, thanks to foundational elements already available and fierce survival pressures. Eyes didn't develop gradually via endless transitional forms. They surged forth because the necessary construction genes were long there. Environmental shifts encouraged their use, and rivalry made them vital for staying alive. In mere moments on the evolutionary clock, eyesight turned into a core trait of animal existence, profoundly directing life's trajectory on our planet for the following 500 million years by fostering advanced neural networks, brains, and behaviors of growing complexity. The advent of eyes let creatures detect threats from afar, yet mere sight couldn't suffice in an environment where hunters had grown cunning and relentless. With the capacity to spot prey amid the waves, to orchestrate strikes, and to chase down escapes with accuracy, the urgency on would-be victims ramped up dramatically. The tender-bodied creatures that had flourished in the serene Ediacaran realm now faced unprecedented perils. Evolution countered with a pivotal advancement in life's chronicle. Creatures started forging defenses, tough barriers crafted from seawater minerals, woven into their forms via what we term biomineralization. This wasn't a one-off discovery passed along lineages, but a tactic that nature reinvented scores of times. As diverse animal clusters converged on similar protective designs through varied growth mechanisms, evidence from fossils indicates biomineralization cropped up repeatedly in the waning Ediacaran and dawning Cambrian, with no fewer than 36 distinct emergences of mineralized frames noted in assorted animal phyla. Such striking parallelism highlights how the essential resources and evolutionary urgency were primed, ready for the right genetic and developmental mixes to enable life forms to shape calcium, silica, or phosphate into shielding architectures. These developments align tightly with predation's ascent, pointing to safeguarding against attackers as the main impetus over mere structural aid or shielding from the elements. However, after securing rigid elements, animals repurposed them for diverse roles. Biomineralization's mechanics hinge on seawater's mineral supply, especially calcium carbonate, which seafaring critters employ to build their casings and outer skeletons. In the Cambrian, ocean calcium levels stood about 3 times those of Precambrian times, stemming from ramped-up erosion of land masses and rivers delivering dissolved ions to the depths. This boosted calcium abundance rendered it practical for beasts to pull the substance from the water and arrange it into structured crystal arrays, yielding casings sturdy against the bite of predator mouths or the stab of thorns and talons. The method demands an organic framework, often from proteins or chitin-like compounds where mineral grains can form in precise arrangements, and various animal clades devise distinct spins on this core approach. Trilobites fashion their outer shells from calcite, the identical stuff in their vision organs, yielding a rigid shield enveloping their frames yet permitting movement via jointed sections. During molting, when trilobites discarded their shells to expand, they abandoned intact remnants that endured as fossils in stone. That's why trilobites rank among the plentiful relics from the Cambrian and later eras. Mollusks, encompassing today's snails, clams, and squids, evolved protective coverings mainly from aragonite, a variant of calcium carbonate featuring a distinct crystal arrangement compared to calcite, and frequently incorporated organic layers to form hybrid designs that offered both durability and minimal weight. The nacre, or mother of pearl, coating the interiors of numerous mollusk shells, exemplifies this biomineralized blend, where slender aragonite crystal plates are interleaved with protein films, enabling the material to withstand shocks without fracturing. Brachiopods, superficially akin to clams, yet markedly distinct in their inner workings and phylogenetic ties, adopted an alternative method, fashioning their outer casings from calcium phosphate instead of calcium carbonate. Among seafaring invertebrates, this material selection stands out as atypical, granting brachiopods greater resilience against breakdown in acidic waters, albeit demanding elevated energy expenditure. Given phosphate's relative scarcity in ocean waters relative to calcium, echinoderms, which comprise contemporary sea stars, sea urchins, and sea cucumbers, innovated further by forming their frameworks from magnesium-enriched calcite, organized into a latticed, open 3D lattice known as stereom. This setup merged robustness with low mass and permitted incremental expansion by depositing onto prior elements, avoiding the need to shed and reconstruct entirely. The range of biomineralization tactics that arose in the Cambrian mirrors the array of habitats animals were exploiting and the array of obstacles they encountered. Seafloor dwellers required armor capable of withstanding predator pressure or current forces that might rip it asunder, whereas swimmers in the open water had to weigh defense against heaviness, as ponderous casings would drain energy for propulsion. Certain species added protrusions like spines or tubules to their exteriors to deter ingestion, while others opted for sleek, hydrodynamic shapes that minimized resistance. The rise of rigid exteriors further unlocked novel ways to forage, as these calcified elements served as implements for handling meals, whether grazing seaweed from substrates, pulverizing fellow shelled prey, or sifting bits from the currents. Beyond the creatures themselves, the emergence of calcified frames triggered sweeping transformations. Such rigid features reshaped underwater landscapes by supplying fresh surfaces for other life to settle upon. As casings and frames piled up on the ocean bottom, they layered into carbonate deposits destined to harden into limestone, Earth's most prevalent sedimentary stone. Proto-reefs started emerging too, driven by sponge-like entities termed archaeocyathids that erected calcium carbonate edifices reaching sunward, forging intricate 3D scaffolds for fellow fauna to dwell within. Unlike today's coral-dominated reefs in makeup and form, these primordial versions fulfilled comparable roles by boosting environmental intricacy and refuge for varied lifeforms. Biomineralization's development also rippled through the planet's carbon dynamics over eons, with calcium carbonate casings acting as a major repository for CO2, drawing it from air and seas to store it geologically for vast timescales. Upon death, these accumulations on the seabed yielded enormous limestone reserves that trapped carbon, possibly shaping worldwide weather and seawater composition. How biomineralization intertwined with CO2 concentrations in the air and climatic shifts continues to intrigue researchers who probe its dynamics in the Cambrian era, and if carbon flux alterations spurred the explosion's tempo and form. This surge in hard-bodied innovation marks a pivotal juncture in life's chronicle, where fresh abilities unlocked boundless horizons and rewrote survival's fundamentals. Pre-biomineralization, creatures faced constraints on scale and fragility, incapable of bulking up without self-crushing or fending off threats adeptly. Post-innovation, they could explore diverse morphologies, niches, and endurance tactics. Its triumph endures as countless modern sea dwellers fabricate casings and frames via the core chemical pathways forged in the Cambrian, with coastlines we tread, comprising sands mostly from shattered shell remnants, the towering limestone cliffs along shorelines, the chalk that fills blackboards for writing. These stand as enduring remnants of that pivotal ancient breakthrough, tangible proof of the era when creatures first crafted protective shells, reshaping the planet forever. The breakthroughs fueling the Cambrian explosion, eyes, shells, and intricate body structures, arose, not in a fixed landscape. Our planet was shifting dynamically then, as land masses glided over its crust, propelled by the steady, unyielding push of plate tectonics. To grasp the realm where Cambrian life thrived and adapted, we must rewind to the planet's layout, 541 million years ago. A landscape that would seem utterly alien to us today. The outlines of today's continents were absent. The Cambrian world's map bore no resemblance to our own, with land masses dispersed across the planet in patterns unrelated to modern ones. Right before the Cambrian era dawned, Earth's lands had coalesced into a supercontinent named Rodinia, an immense single entity ruling the late Proterozoic. Yet by the Cambrian's onset, Rodinia was splintering, dividing into lesser chunks that separated and carved out the period's defining terrain. This division wasn't one dramatic rupture, but a gradual saga spanning millions of years, fueled by molten flows deep in the mantle and the birth of fresh ocean floors as the crust pulled taut and wore thin. Rodinia's fragmentation spawned long coastlines, broad, shallow shelves off continents, and inland seas spanning land, habitats perfectly suited to the boom of ocean dwellers. The biggest chunk to break free from Rodinia was Gondwana, a colossal landmass overshadowing all rivals, holding about triple the area of any other Cambrian continental piece. Gondwana pieced together elements destined to form South America, Africa, Antarctica, Australia, India, and Arabia, plus minor bits that would fuse into other land masses later via crashes. In the early Cambrian, Gondwana spanned vast latitudes, from the South Pole up past the equator, thus spanning every climate from icy poles to steamy tropics. Over time, it twisted counterclockwise, altering its angle to Earth's spin and rearranging climates across its expanse. Northward from Gondwana sat Laurentia, the next biggest continent, built from the heart of future North America, plus Greenland and chunks of Scotland. In the Cambrian, Laurentia bestrode the equator, fostering a mostly tropical vibe and prime setups for wide, shallow seas inundating its heartland. As oceans swelled in the early Cambrian, these inland waters, warm, light-filled, and loaded with nutrients, blanketed huge swaths, nurturing vibrant sea life. Laurentia's fossils abound, with many locales capturing Cambrian creatures in stunning clarity, a tribute to the thriving habitats in those balmy shallows. Baltica, precursor to Scandinavia, Eastern Europe, and Western Russia, hugged mid to high southern latitudes early on, endowing it with chillier weather than Gondwana or Laurentia. As eras advanced, Baltica spun over 60 degrees counterclockwise and migrated north, entering balmier belts and transforming its shoreline habitats. Siberia, another standalone slab, lingered south of the equator through most of the Cambrian, isolated by broad ocean tracts from piers. Tiny land bits, including future North China, South China, and Southeast Asian segments, dotted Gondwana's edges, forming a tropical-subtropical island chain. Encircling these dispersed lands stretched Panthalassa, an enormous sea blanketing much of the globe, far vaster than today's Pacific. Amid continents, minor seas formed and faded with plate shifts. The Iapetus Ocean grew between Laurentia and Baltica as they parted. The Proto-Tethys Ocean wedged Gondwana from Asian mini-blocks, forging channels for sea creatures to spread across zones. During the Cambrian period, the arrangement of land masses and seas produced intricate networks of ocean flows where warm waters from the equator streamed amid tropical continents and chillier streams swirled at elevated latitudes. Tectonic forces were remarkably vigorous back then, with plates shifting at speeds exceeding the norm for our planet's past. Such swift dynamics carried profound implications for life's development. For one, they generated vast shorelines and expansive shelf seas, settings exceptionally fertile for sea creatures thanks to plentiful light and nutrient inflows from land erosion. Additionally, heightened volcanism at continental edges pumped essential minerals and sustenance into the waters, potentially boosting calcium levels enough to enable shell building in organisms. Furthermore, these shifts forged both isolating divides and linking pathways, shaping how species spread. Deep ocean divides kept groups apart for separate evolution, while land connections and mild seaways facilitated travel across areas. Rhodinia's breakup and the era's dispersed continents fostered unique life zones, each nurturing specialized creature groups suited to their surroundings. Gondwana's wildlife diverged from Laurenția's, just as Baltica's stood apart from both. Yet some widespread types crossed watery divides to thrive on various lands. This spatial setup likely fueled the Cambrian burst of variety by enabling allopatric speciation, the mechanism where isolated groups adapt and split into new forms. As plates wandered and currents altered, once secluded clusters reconnected, sparking rivalries and fresh adaptive breakthroughs. Geologically restless alongside its biological ferment, the Cambrian planet saw lands perpetually relocating and seas forming or vanishing over eons. This ever-shifting terrain set the scene for the evolutionary spectacle of the Cambrian explosion, offering varied habitats to experiment with and hone biological novelties. Laurenția's balmy shallows, Baltica's brisk seas, Gondwana's sprawling coasts, each locale posed unique trials and prospects. Creatures forged in these diverse realms would later seed the vast array of animal forms that blanketed the world in subsequent eras. The Cambrian's fragmented continents endured a climate, worlds away from our modern one, not only in its local variations, but in its essence. It was a hothouse Earth, ice-free at the poles, with heat reaching from tropics to poles and seasons softened by the ocean's dominance over the globe. Remarkably steady compared to later epochs' drastic shifts. The period's 55 million years showed no signs of grand ice ages or wild heat extremes. This evenness, paired with soaring seas that swamped land edges and birthed broad shallows, offered prime venues for ocean dwellers to multiply and roam worldwide. The era's balminess stemmed mainly from sky-high carbon dioxide, a heat-retaining gas that locked in warmth against cosmic escape. Geochemical clues indicate Cambrian CO2 levels hit 10 to 20 times those of pre-industrial times, forging a robust warming blanket that sustained mild conditions poleward, despite slanted sunlight. That CO2 arose from volcanic emissions, gases spewing from deep earth via eruptions and steady releases at spreading ridges. Rhodinia's rifting and the Cambrian's brisk tectonics amplified eruptions, flooding the air with extra CO2 to sustain the hothouse state. With no polar ice caps present, Cambrian Earth lacked the large-scale ice albedo effect, the mechanism where reflective white ice bounces sunlight back into space, fostering a cooling that promotes more ice formation. In their place, the dark seas soaked up sunlight effectively, heating the waters and spreading warmth worldwide via ocean flows. Without ice, sea levels rose substantially, with projections indicating oceans were possibly 50 to 200 meters above today's levels, varying by exact point in the Cambrian. This rise inundated low continental areas, forming vast epicontinental seas that offered shallow, sun-drenched, warm habitats ideal for photosynthetic life to flourish and sustain intricate food chains. Cambrian tropical zones probably mirrored the warmth of today's tropical oceans, with surface temperatures hitting 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. However, the scarcity of reliable temperature indicators from that era introduces considerable doubt into these figures. The geological evidence does confirm, though, that carbonate deposits, typical of warm, low-latitude tropical waters, were plentiful along the shores of continents like Laurentia. These carbonate platforms stretched for hundreds of kilometers, serving as broad, shallow marine shelves where calcium carbonate from seawater solidified and built up into dense layers that later turned into limestone. Creatures in these warm seas constructed shells and frameworks that fed into these accumulations, establishing a cycle in which life adapted to and molded its surroundings. Higher latitudes in the Cambrian were chillier than the tropics, much like now. Yet the shift in temperature from equator to poles was far less steep than in our current climate. Analysis of fossils and sediments points to temperate conditions even at 60 degrees latitude or beyond, rather than icy ones, enabling sea life to occupy coastal areas that freeze over in today's cold seasons. Baltica, positioned in high southern latitudes for most of the Cambrian, preserved signs of diverse, thriving cool water communities, suited to cooler than tropical, but still far from freezing conditions. Such even temperature spread across latitudes likely resulted in milder ocean currents compared to modern ones, as circulation is mainly driven by contrasts in temperature and salinity between equatorial and polar regions. Beyond carbon dioxide, Cambrian air differed in oxygen content too, which had climbed through the late Proterozoic and kept rising into the early Cambrian. By the period's start, oxygen might have comprised 15 to 18% of the atmosphere, nearing but not equaling today's 21%. This oxygen came mainly from photosynthesizers like cyanobacteria and emerging algae, building up because production outpaced consumption. The oxygen surge profoundly impacted animal evolution, chiefly by boosting aerobic respiration's efficiency and permitting bigger, more energetic bodies than low oxygen settings could support. Reconstructing Cambrian seasons accurately is challenging, but continental placements offer hints. Laurentia, spanning the equator, likely saw little fluctuation in heat or daylight, offering steady conditions for non-stop breeding and reliable food without extreme cold or scarcity swings. Gondwana, extending from the South Pole to tropical zones, faced diverse seasonal swings. Its southern parts endured extended dark winters halting photosynthesis, while equatorial areas basked in constant mildness. Such regional seasonal variances probably shaped which species could persist at various latitudes, influencing the biogeography evident in fossils. Cambrian precipitation is even harder to pin down than temperatures. Yet elevated seas and widespread shallows imply strong evaporation, saturating the air with vapor and probably delivering plentiful rain to shores. Absent land plants, though, continental hearts were likely dry, with nothing to hold water or buffer weather extremes. Streams from these desolate uplands likely drained toward the ocean, transporting dissolved minerals and nutrients that enriched the nearshore waters and boosted biological activity. On land, the breakdown of rocks, sped up by intense heat and precipitation, freed up calcium, phosphorus, and various key elements, vital for marine life growth, as well as for forming protective shells and internal structures. Throughout much of the Cambrian era, the steady, balmy conditions endured, offering a reliable setting for the evolutionary burst to play out. Toward the close of the period, though, hints point to a chill that could link to shifts in sea currents or a brief drop in carbon dioxide levels in the air. Though not a complete ice age, this late Cambrian downturn stressed ocean habitats and helped trigger a wave of die-offs that bridged the gap to the Ordovician era. Yet for nearly all of the Cambrian, our planet functioned as a hothouse, mild at every latitude, with elevated ocean heights and plenty of sunlit shallows. Such global conditions were perfect for the spread of intricate animal forms and the routing of food chains that lasted over vast stretches of geological time. The mild, even weather and the fragmented layout of continents in the Cambrian fostered spots where organisms could thrive. What truly highlighted evolution's progress from the Ediacaran's basic forms, however, was how life assembled into integrated communities. As layers built up in places like the Burgess Shale and Chengjiang sites, sea-based networks had grown as elaborate as today's, featuring layered food chains, complex predator-prey links, and a range of survival tactics that spanned almost every niche in the underwater realm. Far from mere chance meetings among isolated kinds, this was an interconnected web where one lineage's fortunes could ripple across the board, impacting distant players without face-to-face clashes. Underpinning any ocean community is the base level of growth, where sunlight and nutrients in solution turn into biomass via photosynthesis. In the Cambrian, cyanobacteria and diverse algae handled this core task, whether as tiny plankton floating freely or bigger, multi-celled versions clinging to the bottom or bobbing topside. These sun harvesters drew in solar power to craft sugars from CO2 and H2O, laying the chemical groundwork for all else in the chain. Coastal Cambrian waters probably teemed with output, thanks to continental runoff of riches and the clear, shallow depths that echoed the busiest marine zones of our era. Next up were the sievers and scrapers, creatures that pulled sustenance from the currents or nibbled substrates. Precambrian holdovers like sponges kept prospering, their unique cells drawing currents through spongy frames to snag germs and debris. Beneath their modest exteriors, these were efficient sieving machines handling huge water flows and aiding in the reuse of materials. Early Cambrian enigmas, the archaeocyathids, built reefs as sieving powerhouses, fashioning habitats while filtering vast amounts of seawater. Trilobites filled assorted roles in the food network with varieties tuned to varied diets. Numerous were bottom scavengers, shuffling over mud to comb through muck for scraps, waste, and decay microbes. Their multifaceted vision likely aided in seafloor travel and spotting overhead threats, as legs with fringes and barbs funneled grit to their jaws. Some trilobites, however, chased or foraged aggressively, boasting heavy crushers for cracking tiny armored quarry. The array of trilobite designs showed their spread across niches, making them key players up and down the trophic ladder. During the Cambrian period, tiny shellfish and brachiopods emerged as effective filter feeders. They secured themselves to solid surfaces or rested on the ocean bottom, passing water over their gills to snag tiny food particles floating in the currents. Notably, brachiopods evolved a refined way to feed, employing a unique feature known as the lopophore, a ring of tentacles lined with cilia that generated flows to draw water inside the shell and trap nutrients. These creatures thrived immensely through the Paleozoic era, giving rise to thousands of species that spread across varied ocean environments. Their plentiful remains in Cambrian sediments highlight just how well the filter feeding approach worked in the fertile nearshore waters, where most sea life gathered. Positioned higher in the food chain, beyond the filterers and browsers, were the hunters, organisms that pursued and consumed others, profoundly influencing the habits and development of their targets. In the mid-Cambrian, Anomalocaris stood at the pinnacle of these predators. This beast, unprecedented in scale and design from prior times, wielded seizing limbs to grab and handle victims, multifaceted eyes to spot motion in the depths, and a round maw lined with grinding plates for breaking down meals. Anomalocaris proved a fearsome stalker. Traces in certain fossilized guts reveal bits of trilobite shells, verifying that such hunters targeted the tough-shelled arthropods scuttling over the seabed. The emergence of these dedicated hunters imposed intense selection pressures, spurring prey to develop stronger armor, pointed projections, and better evasion tactics. Lesser hunters filled spots across the water layers and floor, including arthropods with adapted limbs for snaring minnow-sized quarry, worms burrowing through muck to ambush hidden prey, and perhaps initial chordates, leveraging enhanced propulsion to chase sluggish swimmers. The array of hunting tactics in the Cambrian indicates that predation had risen as a key driver of evolution, with various groups testing novel methods to tackle the core task of pursuit and ingestion. Such variety fostered a setting where fresh ideas paid off handsomely, any tweak offering even a minor edge in snatching food or dodging threats would gain swift favor through natural selection. Cambrian networks also featured specialists in decay and nutrient return, though spotting them in fossils proves tricky, as microbes and molds seldom fossilize. Still, basic ecosystem dynamics point to their role. All the biomass from photosynthesizers, funneled upward through consumption, had to eventually crumble and rejoin the soluble nutrient reserves. These breakdown agents would have mattered most in bottom layers, piled with corpses and possibly short on oxygen, which might delay but not halt the process. The freed elements would then fuel fresh growth in primary makers, closing the loop. What sets Cambrian food networks apart isn't merely their intricacy, but their swift buildup. The Chengjiang layers, from about 520 million years back, reveal mature systems with layered feeding tiers up and running, merely 20 million years past the Cambrian onset. This implies that after the core breakthroughs of the explosion, vision, protective casings, advanced wiring, the ecological setup snapped into place fast. Rather than gradual trial and error, across eons, lineages rapidly claimed open slots, forging dynamics of pursuit, rivalry, and mutualism that defined sea life onward. Far from a rough draft inching toward today's sophistication, Cambrian oceans hosted complete thriving communities, guided by the timeless rules shaping aquatic realms now. They reveal that the core framework of creature interactions took root soon after complex life's dawn. Of every group born in the Cambrian burst, none matched the trilobites for triumph or longevity. These plated arthropods entered the record near 521 million years ago, varied and abundant right away, appearing in seafloor rocks across nearly all landmasses. The abrupt emergence of these creatures in the fossil record, without any clear precursors in older strata, puzzled early paleontologists who anticipated gradual transitional stages building toward such intricate life forms. Rather, what the fossils reveal is a lineage that exploded into existence, equipped with advanced compound eyes, jointed outer skeletons, and tailored limbs, primed to rule the Cambrian oceans and sustain that reign for another 270 million years. Trilobites endured well beyond the Cambrian period, persisting across the Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, and Carboniferous eras, and even reaching into the Permian, establishing them as one of the most enduring animal clades in life's history. The term "one" derives from their signature trait, the segmentation of the body into three lengthwise lobes stretching from head to tail. A prominent central axial lobe housed the primary internal organs, forming a central spine along the creature's length, while bilateral pleural lobes projected outward on both flanks, frequently adorned with spines or decorative features. This tripartite layout remained a constant among all trilobite kinds, despite vast differences in scale and specifics. Additionally, the body split crosswise into three regions: the cephalon, or frontal head shield, a flexible thorax in the center, featuring 2 to over 40 segments based on the type, and the pygidium, a rear tail shield. Such a foundational design offered remarkable adaptability, enabling trilobites to occupy diverse habitats via alterations in the dimensions, contours, and embellishments of these core elements. Their iconic exoskeleton, formed from calcite, the identical mineral they employed for their vision organs, delivered robust defense from threats and injury, yet imposed a notable limitation. In contrast to today's arthropods, which expand steadily by shedding pliable, chitinous coverings and swelling prior to the fresh layer setting, trilobites were compelled to discard their stiff calcite casings at intervals and fabricate a wholly new expanded one. This shedding rendered them briefly defenseless, and the shed husks piled up on ocean bottoms, explaining the profusion of trilobite remains. A single trilobite could undergo molting many tens of times over its lifespan, with every cast-off shell carrying the chance to fossilize and thus inflate the apparent abundance beyond the true numbers of living individuals. The array of trilobite morphologies that arose in the Cambrian mirrored the broad spectrum of habits they pursued, pioneering forms like the olenolids prevalent in Laurentia, sported expansive semicircular cephalons and minimal thoracic segments, indicating suitability for scuttling across shallow, warm seabeds. Red lichides, more typical on southern landmasses such as Gondwana, evolved elongated frames with additional segments and conspicuous spines protruding from the pleural lobes, likely serving as anti-predator armor. The agnostids formed an oddball category of diminutive trilobites, measuring only millimeters, with merely 2 or 3 thoracic sections and such a streamlined build that certain experts once doubted their trilobite status. Though analyses of genetic ties to extant arthropods affirm their inclusion, trilobite vision merits distinct focus, as it embodied one of evolution's pinnacle achievements in sight. Built from calcite prisms, as noted before, these multifaceted eyes featured lenses meticulously crafted and angled to direct rays onto underlying light-sensing tissues. Lens counts differed wildly across taxa, ranging from mere dozens in simpler varieties to exceeding 15,000 in the pinnacle of optical prowess. Eye positioning fluctuated too, with typical species mounting theirs atop the cephalon for panoramic overhead and lateral scans of the environment. Certain sediment-burrowing kinds, however, diminished or eliminated vision altogether, as it offered scant benefit in their murky, lightless domains. The emphasis on forging such elaborate sight mechanisms underscores that trilobites inhabited a realm brimming with visual cues, where detecting dangers, food sources, or breeding partners conferred crucial edges for endurance. Trilobite limbs, seldom captured in fossils due to their unmineralized nature, evidently functioned as highly adaptable tools. From remarkable fossils in sites such as the Burgess Shale, where delicate soft parts survived, it's clear that trilobites had biramous limbs, appendages split into two branches, with one suited for locomotion on the seafloor or in the water, and the other transformed into a respiratory gill. These structures ran along the belly of the thorax and likely served various purposes, allowing the creature to navigate the ocean bottom, generate flows of water to draw in bits of food near the mouth, and facilitate oxygen exchange with the ambient seawater. Certain trilobites evolved unique front limbs close to the mouth, possibly for manipulating prey or detecting stimuli beyond the range of their vision, broadening the creature's environmental perception. The spread of trilobites across the Cambrian world highlights clues about ancient sea currents and the layout of land masses. Some lineages achieved widespread presence on various continents, implying that their larval forms floated freely in the plankton, enabling long-distance travel over vast oceans prior to maturing and settling down. In contrast, other groups stayed confined to particular zones, pointing to physical divides that blocked their migration, or to specialized tolerances for local habitats. For example, the Olanellids were mostly limited to Laurentia, whereas the Redlichides prevailed in Gondwana and the Asian land blocks. Such distribution patterns have helped geologists piece together continental arrangements from the Cambrian and trace the paths of oceanic flows linking these areas. In Cambrian marine communities, trilobites filled diverse niches across multiple food chain levels. Numerous kinds acted as detritivores, sifting through seabed mud to pull out organic matter and tiny organisms, much like burrowing worms that aerated and reshaped the sediment layers. Additional species functioned as suspension feeders, employing their legs to stir up water and snag drifting particles from the currents. A number likely scavenged, consuming corpses that drifted down to the bottom, although just a handful might have hunted actively, employing robust oral tools to pulverize or rip into minor prey. The development of coiling, where they could roll into a defensive sphere by bending the thorax to align the cephalon and pygidium, offered strong protection from attackers, a trait captured in countless fossilized specimens locked in that guarded stance. Trilobites' prominence in the Cambrian cemented their status as the leading arthropods in ocean habitats, a role they held for much of the Paleozoic. Their calcified outer shells ensured superb preservation, granting us an exceptionally detailed chronicle of their development and variety. They offer among the sharpest illustrations of evolution, etched in rock, displaying subtle shifts in form ratios, the rise and fall of spines and decorations, and adjustments to varying surroundings. The trilobites that navigated the Cambrian waters through swimming or creeping embodied advanced arthropod architecture, not rudimentary trials, featuring intricate body designs, advanced detection organs, and a broad array of ecological functions. This blueprint endured effectively for hundreds of millions of years, cementing arthropods as one of life's most triumphant phyla. We have followed the traces of the Cambrian explosion via the riches of the Burgess Shale and Chungjiang deposits, scrutinized the breakthroughs of that era, from visual organs and protective casings to elaborate neural networks, and delved into the realm these primordial beings inhabited. Yet the core mystery lingers unresolved, a puzzle that has gripped researchers since Darwin identified it as a challenge to his framework. Why did the Cambrian burst occur precisely then? And why with such astonishing rapidity? Over 3 billion years, existence clung to basic forms, solitary cells, then rudimentary multicellular clusters devoid of true animal intricacy. Suddenly, within a mere 20 million year span, a blink in geologic time, nearly all principal animal architectures materialized in the strata. This precise sequence calls for an answer. Though experts have advanced many ideas across more than 150 years, the growing agreement holds that no isolated trigger suffices to explain it. Rather, it stemmed from a confluence of factors aligning uniquely at that juncture in planetary history, forging unprecedented circumstances that wouldn't recur in the same way. One of the longest-lasting ideas about the Cambrian explosion has been the oxygen hypothesis, and new studies have sharpened yet also muddied our grasp of how it factored in. Complex animals rely on oxygen for survival, since aerobic respiration, the way they pull energy from nutrients with oxygen's help, is way more effective than oxygen-free options. Something basic like a sponge or worm can get by with minimal oxygen, creeping along with a straightforward design that lets the gas seep right into their tissues. On the other hand, a fierce hunter such as Anomalocaris demands plenty of it, powering those strong swimming muscles, energy-hungry compound eyes, and a nerve network that handles quick reflexes. Throughout much of Earth's past, oxygen in the air and seas stayed too scant to sustain such dynamic, intricate creatures, hovering under 1% of the atmosphere for eons as sunlight. Capturing microbes gradually leaked it out as a byproduct. Things shifted decisively in the late Proterozoic when oxygen started climbing faster. Even so, it hadn't hit today's figures by the Cambrian start. Fresh calculations indicate atmospheric oxygen hit about 15 to 18% in the early Cambrian versus the current 21%. That gap looks minor, but it marked a tipping point where oxygen-fueled energy production could finally back bigger, more vigorous forms. Beyond that, oxygen is key to making collagen, the protein webs that bind animal tissues and scaffold elaborate shapes. Low oxygen hampers proper collagen assembly. So even if the genes for fancy bodies were there, the creature couldn't whip up the molecular tools to shape them. The late Proterozoic oxygen uptick might have pushed past that barrier, making elaborate animal forms viable at last. Still, oxygen by itself doesn't account for the whole burst, as levels had inched up over millions of prior years with no sudden surge matching the debut of advanced life. This points to oxygen as a must-have, but not the sole spark. Other elements teamed up with it to spark the surge in variety. Among them, ocean chemistry likely played a big part, especially the buildup of calcium and similar minerals for crafting shells and bones. Late Proterozoic erosion of land masses flooded the seas with massive calcium loads, boosting concentrations to around 3 times what they were before. For the first time, this turned biomineralization into a low-cost trick, letting creatures grab calcium from the water and form solid crystals without burning too much fuel. Such mineral bounty opened doors to fresh designs impossible earlier. As soon as some species armored up against threats, it kicked off an arms race. Victims thickened their shields while attackers honed tougher bites and craftier tactics. This cycle, called escalation theory, argues that hunter-prey tensions fueled tons of Cambrian creativity, with every shield upgrade spurring better weapons in response. Fossils back this up, revealing bite scars on trilobite shells that healed, punctures bored into armor, and gut remnants packed with bits of shelled victims. Eyes emerging then makes perfect sense too, offering huge edges for spotting dinner from afar or dodging danger early. The Cambrian timing might also tie to the breakup of ancient microbial mats that ruled ocean floors for billions of years. These dense layers of cyanobacteria and kin formed flat living landscapes where Ediacaran dwellers mostly skimmed the surface, munching the mat or soaking up food via their pancake-like forms. But burrowing habits, evolving right at the Ediacaran-Cambrian line, wrecked those mats, stirring the mud and opening a full 3D realm for life to spread above and below the bottom. This shift in the Cambrian seafloor, known as the substrate revolution, dramatically altered the makeup of ocean ecosystems and likely unlocked fresh ecological roles that were previously unavailable. Burrowing creatures could now tap into nutrient-rich deposits hidden within the mud. Although breaking up the microbial layers might have lessened rivalry from those bacterial groups and released essential elements for animal use, the inherited genetic and growth pathways from prior lineages were equally vital in fueling the swift burst of Cambrian variety. Studies in evolutionary developmental biology, commonly shortened to Evo-Devo, have shown that the core set of genes for constructing intricate forms was mostly assembled prior to the Cambrian onset. Hox genes, responsible for shaping body segments and arranging appendages and internal structures along the main axis, appear in almost the same versions among diverse animal phyla, spanning everything from annelids to arthropods to chordates. Such widespread presence indicates that these key regulatory genes originated in the shared forebear of all animals and were passed down to the branches that proliferated in the Cambrian. During the explosion, it wasn't the creation of these genes that shifted, but rather their application in fresh pairings and settings, yielding innovative forms via tweaks to when and where genes activate, instead of crafting wholly novel genetic systems. This adaptability in genetics ensured that, as soon as surroundings supported elaborate anatomies, the required building blocks were primed for use and adjustment. Minor adjustments to how current genes were controlled could yield profound shifts in physical structure, permitting quick adaptive leaps without the gradual buildup of brand-new genetic code. Far from being an era where blueprints for animal construction were devised anew, the Cambrian explosion involved tweaking, recombining, and applying pre-existing directives in inventive manners. The pace of this event makes more sense once we see that natural selection wasn't beginning empty-handed, but leveraging an advanced genetic repertoire honed across vast stretches of pre-Cambrian history, spanning hundreds of millions of years. The interplay of these varied elements, climbing oxygen concentrations, greater calcium supplies, the upheaval of bacterial carpets, predatory demands, and the unleashing of ancestral growth genes, formed an unprecedented tempest of circumstances in Earth's past. Higher oxygen supported the oxygen-dependent energy processes needed for dynamic, multifaceted organisms, whereas boosted calcium levels rendered the formation of mineralized shells viable in terms of energy for the initial time. The push from hunters sparked a relentless cycle of adaptation, spurring ongoing advances in attack and protection strategies. Meanwhile, the developmental framework passed from deep-rooted forebears supplied the means to swiftly craft diverse anatomies by altering established genes, bypassing the need for fresh inventions, upsetting the bacterial mats, unveiled vertical habitats and biological prospects absent in the flat. Mat-covered Ediacaran seas. As these components converged in a narrow early Cambrian interval, biology erupted in a surge of ingenuity and multiplicity, laying down the foundational designs of animal existence for the ensuing half-billion years. The Cambrian waters teemed not just with forebears of today's phyla, but with entities so peculiar that their initial fossil finds baffled experts, defying assignment to familiar life groups. Paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould memorably labeled them weird wonders in his 1989 volume, Wonderful Life. Creatures embodying developmental trials with no living heirs. Forms tested out solely in the Cambrian and later discarded, vanishing from later geological layers. Gould posited that such vanished types illustrated a peak in structural variety, with evolution probing broader anatomical options than in any following period, and that many of these initial trials culminated in oblivion, yielding a contemporary animal roster that's merely a fraction of evolution's early output. Among the standout oddities was hallucigenia, a being so outlandish that experts first pieced it together, inverted, confusing its dorsal spines for ambulatory limbs and its true limbs for upward-pointing protective or sensing features. This odd organism measured only a few centimeters in length, featuring a segmented worm-shaped form propped up by 7 pairs of limbs that each terminated in small claws, alongside 7 elongated spines rising from its upper side, likely serving as a shield from predators. Once the proper alignment was confirmed via superior fossil finds, hallucinia continued to baffle experts, lacking any evident modern counterparts and fitting awkwardly into the animal kingdom's phylogenetic framework. The term, quote 3 in its name evoked the ethereal, otherworldly aspect of its form, as if it stepped from a bizarre artwork rather than Earth's genuine biological record. Opabinia posed a similarly confounding enigma upon its official unveiling in the 1970s. During a 1972 conference presentation, paleontologist Harry Whittington unveiled his depiction of the beast, prompting the crowd to erupt in unexpected chuckles, struggling to accept that such an entity had truly roamed ancient seas. It sported 5 eyes positioned along its head's crown, an arrangement unique among all documented species, plus a supple, trunk-like nozzle jutting from its front, crowned with seizing barbs that evidently aided in capturing food. The torso featured divisions with side flaps protruding from every section, possibly for propulsion through the waves, lending the creature an eerie, sinuous motion in the depths. Even after thorough examinations, Opabinia's lineage stays ambiguous, with competing studies linking it to arthropods, assorted worm clades, or a standalone branch. Waiwaxia contributed yet more eccentricity to the Cambrian lineup. This diminutive being, usually spanning just several centimeters, was armored in interlocking plates known as sclerites, lined up in bands over its dorsal area, complemented by dual lines of taller spines arching skyward to form an imposing barrier. Beneath, it had a robust, foot-like base, akin to those in today's mollusks, implying it inched along the ocean bottom, nibbling on bacterial films or decaying matter. Blending mollusk traits with this prickly plating has left Wywaxia's taxonomy in flux, as some scientists view it as a precursor to mollusks, while others align it with annelid worms. Its spot in life's family tree sparks ongoing arguments, underscoring the challenges of decoding prehistoric anatomies that defy contemporary classifications. Discussions surrounding these bizarre marvels and their implications have shifted markedly since Gould spotlighted them for wider audiences. In crafting Wonderful Life, Gould reflected the dominant theory that numerous Burgess Shale denizens embodied distinct phyla, core architectural designs unlinked to any current lineages. That perspective implied the Cambrian unleashed vastly greater form variety than survives now, with life's trajectory marked by a steady reduction in options, trimming the evolutionary bush by weeding out most initial oddities. Yet as fresh fossils emerged and research methods advanced, plenty of these once isolated types got reassigned as precursors to established phyla. Their quirky looks stemmed from unconventional feature mixes, not wholly innovative designs. Take Halicenia. It's widely regarded nowadays as a primitive kin to velvet worms, those pliable, land-dwelling invertebrates that persist in reduced numbers compared to Cambrian times. The dorsal spines and overall build that appeared so extraterrestrial in those shale relics. Echo traits in living velvet worms and additional early Paleozoic remains. Anomalocaris, once parsed as three distinct entities, a medusa-like orifice, a prawnish trunk, and enigmatic discs, is recognized as a basal arthropod, an antecedent to the clade-spawning today's insects, crustaceans, and relatives. Opabinia, for all its quintet of eyes and odd nozzle, ties back to arthropods through sundry structural cues. Still, its precise niche in that burst of forms lingers unresolved. This revised view doesn't render the Cambrian mundane, or its inhabitants, mere rough drafts of modern life. The era's variety was truly staggering, and numerous designs from then proved evolutionary cul-de-sacs, yielding no heirs. What's transformed is our grasp of evolutionary dynamics and the right way to gauge form diversity, instead of embodying wholly distinct lineages that vanish later on. Numerous eccentric oddities seem to have been initial trials among stem members of established phyla, featuring odd assortments of traits prior to the stabilization of each group's standard attributes. During the Cambrian era, the core body architectures of today's phyla remained under development, with various branches exploring diverse approaches to common challenges, and the divisions among these categories far blurrier than they would eventually solidify into. The demise of these peculiar types reveals key insights into evolutionary dynamics. Innovations don't always endure over time, and a body structure that operates effectively under specific ecological circumstances may falter once those conditions shift. The creatures that endured beyond the Cambrian to establish the primary animal branches visible in the modern world weren't inherently better in any fundamental way. They were merely those whose unique trait mixes happened to perform sufficiently in the evolving habitats of the early Paleozoic, enabling them to evade extinction and branch out into fresh varieties. Evolution involves a degree of chance, with historical flukes and fortune playing parts. Consequently, the planet we live on now isn't the sole conceivable result of the Cambrian burst, but just the path that unfolded. Of all the bizarre beings from the Cambrian, the most pivotal to our own narrative might not have been the wildest-looking ones, but the seemingly ordinary. Tiny swimmers scarcely detectable in fossils equipped with a basic elastic rod along their spines. These represented the primitive chordates, forebears of fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and eventually, people. Their tale merits closer focus as we follow the Cambrian heritage onward. Within the myriad species filling Cambrian waters, the majority spawned offspring that developed into the commonplace invertebrate categories of our era. Insects and crustaceans trace back to Cambrian arthropods, snails and clams to ancient mollusks, sea stars and sea urchins to Cambrian echinoderms. Yet one cluster of life forms, easy to miss amid the period's more abundant and eye-catching inhabitants, would spawn a branch of immense consequence. These were the chordates, defined by a supple rod, known as a notochord extending dorsally, a dorsal nerve cord, pharyngeal slits in the pharyngeal area, and a muscular postanal tail. Compared to the multifaceted eyes of trilobites or the seizing appendages of Anomalocaris, these traits appeared mundane. Yet they laid the groundwork for one of nature's grandest triumphs. The vertebrate framework that later yielded fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, and the very species, crafting and absorbing these lines. The oldest documented chordates, from the Cambrian, show up in China's Changjiang deposits. Those exquisitely maintained fossils from around 520 million years ago that we looked at before. Included among these relics are Hycoichthys and Milocunmingia. Petite, fish-resembling forms, measuring just 2 to 3 centimeters long, bearing the essential chordate markers, plus traits that foreshadowed vertebrate hallmarks. Such creatures featured segmented, muscular segments termed myomeres aligned on both flanks of a notochord, facilitating the sinuous motions essential for propulsion through water. They had pharyngeal slits potentially serving dual roles in filtering food and breathing, drawing oxygen from currents flowing through them. Most vitally, they displayed signs of a more elaborate anterior section than fellow invertebrates, with clusters of sense organs and perhaps the dawn of a cartilaginous cranium to shield the expanded nerve cord up front. The true importance of these nascent Cambrian chordates lies not in their scale or prevalence. They were greatly overshadowed by arthropods and other invertebrates, but in the evolutionary promise they embodied. The notochord, that straightforward elastic bar of reinforced tissue, offered an internal framework for muscular leverage, yielding a far superior propulsion system than the fluid pressure-based hydrostatic skeletons of other fauna. This breakthrough permitted chordates to swim with greater vigor than many peers, even if they fell short of ruling the Cambrian oceans as top hunters. Positioned dorsally along the back instead of ventrally like in most invertebrates, the nerve cord received protection from the notochord and its enclosing muscles, and at its front end, it already displayed early swelling that foreshadowed the development of a brain. The Burgess Shale, from about 508 million years ago, offers another key element in the tale of chordates through the fossil of Pikaia, a creature Charles Darwin would have valued greatly if he had been aware of it. Pikaia was tiny, topping out at around 4 centimeters long with a flat, blade-shaped form that rippled as it moved upward through the water. In prime specimens, the notochord stands out plainly, extending along the full body length and offering the essential framework for the creature's propulsion in swimming. Although Pikaia missed out on the sophisticated traits found in Hycoichthys, like distinct pharyngeal slits or an elaborate head, it shows that chordates had spread widely across regions by mid-Cambrian times, showing up in Asian sites like Chengjiang and North American ones in the Burgess Shale. Gazing at models of these modest aquatic beings from the fossil layers in China and Canada, lets us glimpse creatures that connect to us via a shared forebear lost in the depths of ancient history. We're witnessing the first traces of body features that would later expand into the human form. The notochord stretching down the back of Haikuichthys served as the foundational element for your backbone. Meanwhile, the dorsal nerve cord evolved into your spinal cord and brain, and the pharyngeal slits, despite not surviving in their initial shape, shaped elements of your jaw and ears via intricate changes spanning hundreds of millions of years. In examining the Burgess Shale fauna, Stephen Jay Gould highlighted this element of chance. He noted that had Pikaia perished amid one of the numerous ecological upheavals hitting Cambrian ocean dwellers, the whole arc of vertebrate development could have been averted. No fish would have appeared, no amphibians venturing onto shores, no dinosaurs, no mammals, no primates, and no humans reflecting on life's chronicle. Our very presence, Gould contended, stems from a sequence of chance events in history, kicking off with the endurance of a diminutive, apparently trivial swimmer in Cambrian waters. Admittedly, this perspective simplifies things a bit, given the variety of chordate branches in the Cambrian, where losing just one might not doom the whole clade. Still, it highlights a core reality of evolution. Outcomes aren't reliably foreseen from starting points, and the species that look most formidable or suited at any instant aren't always those crafting the lasting impact, shifting from these initial Cambrian chordates to genuine vertebrates boasting hardened skeletons spanned millions of years, playing out across the Ordovician and Silurian eras as creatures started laying down calcium phosphate in cartilage to form bones and teeth. In many lines, the notochord got supplanted by a divided vertebral column, granting superior rigidity and adaptability. Pharyngeal slits turned into gills among fish, then reshaped partly into parts of the jaw and ear in land-dwelling vertebrates. The dorsal nerve cord ballooned markedly up front, growing into the intricate brain, enabling vertebrates to handle enormous sensory inputs and orchestrate advanced actions. Yet every advancement afterward rested on the Cambrian groundwork, the core chordate design that surfaced in the explosion and demonstrated such adaptability that it could adapt and refine across the following 500 million years. These primitive chordates also reveal a wider trend in the Cambrian burst, how pivotal breakthroughs shaping animal diversity often arose not in grand ruling forms but in petite, overlooked ones. The standout beasts of the Cambrian, like the thickly plated trilobites and the hunting anomalocarids, charted routes that culminated in cul-de-sacs or reduced rolls. In contrast, certain tiny and subtle organisms set the stage for later bursts of evolution. This pattern underscores how evolutionary triumph plays out over varied timelines with distinct measures of achievement in the near term compared to the distant future. Short-lived supremacy in a habitat doesn't guarantee enduring survival or branching in the evolutionary tree. The Cambrian chordates were our forebears. This doesn't mean that any single Pikaia or Haikuichthys served as a direct progenitor for today's humans, given that those particular lines probably vanished long ago. Rather, it signifies their place within the chordate clade, equipped with the synapomorphies that characterize our lineage and embodying initial forays into the body plan that would later spark the vertebrate explosion. Gazing upon the fossilized remains of these diminutive swimmers from sites in China and Canada reveals creatures that connected to us via a shared forebear lost in the depths of ancient time. We're witnessing the first manifestations of traits that would evolve into the framework of the human form. The notochord along the back of Haikuichthys evolved into your backbone. That dorsal nerve cord gave rise to your spinal cord and brain. Even the pharyngeal slits, absent now in their primal state, influence the growth of your jaw and inner ear. Beyond shaping ocean ecosystems, the Cambrian laid down the core design for anatomy that enabled organisms to invade terrestrial realms, soar through the air, and cultivate the intelligence to comprehend their origins. The Cambrian era, famed for its burst of creativity and variety, didn't conclude in abrupt disaster. No comet strike, no vast lava flows, no spectacle closed out this pivotal phase in Earth's tale. Instead, it eased into the Ordovician around 485.4 million years ago, signaled by quiet alterations in seawater composition, varying ocean depths, and evolving leading marine populations. Yet the shift wasn't entirely seamless. The closing Cambrian featured multiple die-offs that slashed ocean diversity and reordered habitats, wiping out early and mid-era powerhouses while opening doors for fresh expansions. The initial big upheaval struck toward the early Cambrian's close about 59 million years ago, as various trilobite clans that thrived in the opening burst started fading. The Olenids, those standout trilobites ruling Laurentia's warm coastal waters with their broad half-moon cephala and fancy spines, vanished completely from the rocks. The Redlichiid trilobites, dominant across southern landmasses, took heavy hits, though a few branches hung on through the mid-Cambrian until their final demise. The tiny shelly fauna from the Cambrian dawn, those modest mollusks and others with basic hard parts, plummeted too in this phase, hinting that the settings boosting their debut had transformed. What sparked this early Cambrian purge is still murky, but multiple influences likely converged. Seawater chemistry kept wavering then, as photosynthesis-fueled oxygen output clashed with depletion from breathing and decay. Records from late early Cambrian layers show spells of deep water anoxia, where O2 dipped too low for most fauna, pressuring ecosystems and spurring losses, especially for those needing rich oxygen zones. Sea level drops might have factored in as well, emptying continental shelves and shrinking prime coastal zones, herding species into tighter, fiercer contests. The mid-Cambrian, encompassing the Burgess Shale and the height of many lineages variety, offered a steadier stretch than what flanked it. Spanning roughly 509 to 497 million years ago, this era sustained trilobite triumphs as they branched into novel shapes and slots. Alongside surges in other arthropods, the spread of brachiopods and mollusks, and the budding echinoderm surge. But the reef-forming archaeocyathids, vital in the early phase, waned mid-Cambrian and died out before the end, their niche empty until later builders arose. Starting about 497 million years ago, the late Cambrian posed fresh trials for sea dwellers. During the late Cambrian, a sequence of extinction episodes struck various marine groups at varying intervals, leading to a steady decline in biodiversity instead of one massive disaster. Trilobites, the leading arthropods for much of the period, underwent major species replacements as numerous genera vanished, while fresh varieties emerged to take their place. These losses hit hardest among specialized ecological types, creatures finely tuned to narrow habitats that struggled when those settings shifted. For example, seafloor trilobites that subsisted on organic debris in the mud might have been hit by shifts in ocean currents, which disrupted how nutrients and detritus spread across the ocean bottom. Around 485.4 million years ago, the Cambrians close featured a more profound extinction episode, impacting a wide array of sea creatures, known occasionally as the Cambrian Ordovician boundary event. It wiped out roughly 40 to 50% of marine genera, though estimates differ based on the taxa studied and the fossil record's preservation quality. Trilobites took another blow, with key families vanishing, yet the lineage endured and later flourished anew in the Ordovician. Conodonts, those slender, eel-like critters, boasting mineralized, tooth-resembling elements common in Cambrian and subsequent strata, displayed notable turnovers across this divide. Brachiopods, along with other suspension feeders, faced heavy die-offs, hinting at disruptions in oceanic fertility or chemical balance. Debate surrounds the drivers of this terminal Cambrian extinction, as experts highlight diverse influences. Rock geochemistry from the era signals widespread ocean anoxia as a key factor, with low oxygen zones in deeper waters spreading to shallower zones and forming lethal expanses. Such oxygen shortages could stem from altered current systems, potentially tied to continental drift and the formation or blockage of oceanic passages that reshaped water exchange among basins. Sea levels fluctuated too, showing signs of drops that bared shelves and rises that reflooded them, fostering chaotic conditions that pressured sea life. Climatic shifts might have contributed, albeit with murkier proof compared to later wipeouts. The Cambrian featured a consistently warm, ice-free hothouse world, but research indicates a late-period chill, maybe from dropping CO2 concentrations or modified oceanic heat flows. This wasn't severe enough for outright icing, like in the Ordovician, but subtle shifts in temperature could still rattle sea communities by remixing nutrient flows, tweaking seasonal bloom timings, and relocating viable habitats for species. Yet these crises don't paint the Cambrian as a flop or a slate wiped mostly clean. The lineages that weathered the late-period culls rose to rule early Paleozoic seas, branching out and crafting novel shapes that outshone their forerunners. Trilobites, despite shedding variety by the Cambrian's finale, bounced back in the Ordovician and hit their species-rich zenith. Brachiopods boomed, turning into the prime shelled dwellers in countless ocean realms. Echinoderms, minor figures in the Cambrian, spread into the diverse array defining their Paleozoic role. And chordates, those tiny swimmers so unassuming back then, embarked on the evolutionary path leading to vertebrate bursts, spawning fish, tetrapods, and ultimately mammals. The Cambrian's wrap-up marked no finale but a handover, bridging one chapter of creature development to the next. Breakthroughs from the era, like vision, armor plating, intricate neural setups, and advanced anatomies, lingered on, refining further. The Cambrians forged ecological frameworks, tiered food chains, predator-prey escalations, and niche divisions filled by experts, all solidified as enduring traits of earthly biology. That explosive Cambrian surge laid the foundational blueprint for animal existence. What came next in later geological eras wasn't a wholesale replacement of that foundational framework, but rather an expansion and polishing of its elements, a gradual exploration of the potential locked within the body designs and ecological interactions that originated during those extraordinary 55 million years when life embraced complexity. Although the Cambrian explosion sparked a multitude of inventive body forms and trials, and though numerous such trials vanished through extinction or yielded only limited descendants, one lineage of creatures forged a lineage that persisted, across an astonishingly vast stretch of time. Trilobites, the heavily plated arthropods that burst onto the fossil scene about 521 million years ago, populated Earth's seas for the ensuing 270 million years, enduring the Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Carboniferous, and deep into the Permian, before ultimately falling to the planet's most devastating mass extinction. For context, this span of trilobite prosperity lasted roughly 54 times longer than the full history of our own genus Homo. They observed the ascent and collapse of innumerable other clades, all while adjusting, evolving, and holding fast to their core body structure amid shifts in conditions that would have wiped out its less adaptable life forms. The trilobites' triumphs in the Ordovician era, which succeeded the Cambrian, illustrate how the Cambrian's breakthroughs could be honed and built upon across eons. Spanning 485.4 to 443.8 million years ago, the Ordovician marked the height of trilobite variety, with projections indicating over 5,000 species arising in that interval alone. This burst of forms unfolded as the land masses kept inching across the globe, and ocean levels stayed elevated, sustaining broad, shallow marine expanses, perfect for seafloor-dwelling arthropods. Trilobites branched out into varieties suited to virtually every ocean niche, from the bright, warm shallows of coral-like reefs to the shadowy abysses along continental edges, from silty coastal bays to pristine offshore realms. In the Ordovician, trilobites refined their visual systems further, with certain kinds developing the schizochroal eyes, typical of phacopid trilobites. These superior compound eyes featured fewer yet substantially bigger facets than the holochroal eyes of prior trilobites, each facet a sophisticated doublet setup that compensated for light distortions and delivered outstanding sharpness. The gaps amid the facets in schizochroal eyes contained calcite, forming a unified, sturdy ocular mass instead of the film-shielded clusters seen in ancestral versions. Such an upgrade enabled these trilobites to perceive their surroundings with striking precision, likely aiding in spotting threats or tracking prey. Even so, the high energy demands of constructing and sustaining these intricate eyes imply that sight played a crucial role in their way of life. Yet trilobite modifications went well beyond vision alone. Certain Ordovician trilobites gained the knack for full enrollment, coiling into a tight sphere where the cephalon and pygidium meshed so flawlessly that vulnerable parts stayed shielded from attackers. This enrollment stance, captured eternally in myriad fossils as trilobites locked in defense, offered solid defense from smashing or gnawing assaults and probably helped them endure in predation-heavy settings. Additional trilobites sprouted ornate spines and tubercles on their shells, features that rendered them tough to ingest or grasp, whereas others streamlined into agile swimmers, sacrificing some plating for greater swiftness and maneuverability. Trilobite numbers started waning in the Devonian, dubbed the era of fishes, as the surge of jawed vertebrates introduced unfamiliar hunting threats to their communities. These fish, armed with robust jaws and grinding dentition, pierced the calcite plating that had long safeguarded trilobites against softer-bodied foes. Moreover, the speed and detection skills of these backboned hunters turned them into daunting pursuers in the open seas where trilobites had previously roamed with little hindrance. Species counts for trilobites plummeted through the Devonian, shrinking from thousands in Ordovician times to maybe just hundreds by its close. Those that persisted were often either finely tuned to niches with milder fish threats like profound depths or oxygen-poor areas, or versatile enough to thrive across diverse settings and diets. The Carboniferous era, renowned for its expansive, coal-forming swamps and the emergence of the planet's initial major terrestrial forests, marked a sharp decline for trilobites, leaving them as mere shadows of their past prominence. Just a few lineages endured, clinging to overlooked niches and peripheral environments that remained untapped by the era's thriving competitors, such as assorted mollusks, brachiopods, and the burgeoning array of arthropods, including primitive crustaceans. Those trilobites that made it to the Carboniferous were typically diminutive and unremarkable creatures, a far cry from the massive, robustly plated giants that once ruled the Cambrian and Ordovician oceans. Their endurance stemmed not from overt supremacy, but from adeptness at thriving in harsh settings that deterred other life forms, underscoring how evolutionary triumph can involve strategic withdrawal to the edges instead of head-on rivalry with fresher arrivals on the scene. Trilobites' concluding act played out in the Permian period, the final chapter of the Paleozoic era. At that stage, they dwindled to merely a scattering of genera, confined to particular locales and habitats. The Earth they navigated bore little resemblance to the world of their Cambrian forebears. Land masses had fused into the supercontinent Pangaea, shrinking overall shorelines and erasing numerous shallow inland seas that previously offered expansive livable spaces. The climate grew harsher, with glaciation gripping southern Pangaea's fringes, while the supercontinent's heart turned parched. Ocean life, meanwhile, fell under the sway of creatures that arose well after the Cambrian burst, featuring reef-forming corals, varied mollusks and brachiopods, and a swelling presence of fish. Trilobites met their end amid the Permian-Triassic mass extinction, a cataclysm around 252 million years ago that wiped out roughly 90 to 96% of marine species, sparked by colossal volcanic outbursts in present-day Siberia, which unleashed vast amounts of heat-trapping gases, leading to runaway warming, acidic seas, and broad-scale oxygen shortages. This disaster proved insurmountable for the lingering trilobites. The ancient lineages that weathered the late Paleozoic vanished alongside myriad others, and trilobites faded eternally from the fossil archives. Their 270 million-year saga concluded, cementing them as one of the most enduring clades in the chronicle of multicellular organisms. This fate illustrates that regardless of a lineage's prowess or fine-tuning to its surroundings, oblivion awaits every branch over sufficient epochs. Beyond their extraordinary persistence, trilobites' inheritance endures through one of the richest, most intricate fossil archives among all taxa, with over 20,000 species cataloged from global strata and fresh finds surfacing routinely. This unparalleled documentation renders them essential tools for probing evolution, geographic distributions, and Earth's biological timeline, given their broad dispersal and swift diversification amid shifting conditions. Trilobites excel as index fossils, aiding scientists in dating strata and piecing together vanished ecosystems. Distinct species and genera, tied to specific epochs and areas, offer a vivid timeline of life's reactions to continental drift, fluctuating oceans, and climatic swings from hot to cold. Trilobites further highlight a key tenet of evolutionary dynamics and adjustment. Their prosperity rested on a versatile blueprint, endlessly adaptable to myriad ways of life and settings. yet anchored by the defining traits of the lineage. The tripartite form, calcified shell, multifaceted eyes, and biramous limbs. All these bedrock elements held steady across 270 million years of trilobite history, even as outer aspects like dimensions, contours, decorations, and ratios shifted dramatically. Such a blend of steadfast essentials and adaptable extras defines thriving evolutionary expansions, enabling a clade to venture into varied niches while upholding the proven framework and functions that fueled the archetype's initial triumph. Cambrian trilobites forged this potent model, and their heirs sustained it across vast temporal gulfs, tweaking it for new realities without forsaking the foundational design crafted by their pioneering kin during the pivotal surge of complex fauna. A staggering 541 million years divide us from the dawn of the Cambrian era, an interval so enormous it eludes true understanding. Imagine squeezing the full timeline of complex animal evolution into one calendar year, starting the Cambrian burst on New Year's Day. Then dinosaurs wouldn't emerge until the end of September. Their wipeout would hit in the waning days of October, while all of human society's arc, from initial farming villages to now, would squeeze into those last ticking moments before the clock strikes 12 on New Year's Eve. Even so, across this colossal stretch of time, with innumerable years gone by and endless transformations altering Earth's face, the core designs forged in the Cambrian still shine through in the vibrant life we see all around. All the principal animal phyla thriving now link their roots straight back to that explosive Cambrian event. A connection that sharpens when we scrutinize the foundational body, blueprints, and key anatomical traits marking each phylum. Arthropods, the rulers of today's habitats, from insects and spiders to crustaceans and kin, stem from those Cambrian pioneers that scuttled over prehistoric seabeds and glided in ancient seas. Just the sheer variety in insects, boasting over 1 million catalogued kinds and untold others yet to find, expands on the core arthropod framework that debuted back in the Cambrian. Mollusks, embracing a range from snails and slugs through clams and oysters up to the clever octopuses and squids, inherit the legacy of those early Cambrian shelled beings that pioneered biomineralization to forge defensive casings against inaugural hunters. Echinoderms, the quirky phylum featuring sea stars, sea urchins, sea cucumbers, and brittle stars, entered late in the Cambrian as basic forms, yet they proliferated wildly in later eras, evolving their signature pentaradial symmetry and distinctive water vascular setup for movement and nourishment. Brachiopods, the lamp shells that ruled Paleozoic ocean bottoms and linger today in slimmer ranks, locked in their primary body form during the Cambrian, holding on to it with stunning stability across 500 million years. Chordates, that modest and unassuming bunch encompassing Picaia and Hyquicthus, spawned the vertebrates, destined to spread beyond seas into terrestrial realms and skies, yielding fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Cambrian breakthroughs extended beyond isolated clades, encompassing vital skills that became indispensable for intricate animal existence, no matter the branch. Sight evolving separately across various lines in the Cambrian, reshaped predator-prey dynamics and endures as a key way animals sense their surroundings. Compound eyes in today's insects and crustaceans follow the identical core mechanics as those in Cambrian trilobites, assembling views via clusters of light-capturing cells. Camera-style eyes in vertebrates and cephalopods, despite arising separately from distinct precursors. Both hark back to Cambrian origins, when initial photosensitive patches matured into genuine vision systems. Biomineralization, the knack for forming rigid elements from ambient minerals, upended animal existence in the Cambrian and stays central for myriad species now. Modern mollusks craft their shells via the very chemistry their Cambrian forebears harnessed, forming calcium carbonate crystals bolstered by protein scaffolds. Vertebrate skeletons and dentition, relying on calcium phosphate instead of carbonate, build upon biomineralization techniques that originated in the Cambrian. Creatures lacking their own hard parts still feel its ripple effects. Inhabiting realms shaped by shell and bone architectures that build layered environments. Force hunters to tackle shielded quarry and pile up mineral relics into immense limestone layers and kindred sediments. The interplay of species defining current biomes likewise springs from Cambrian foundations. During the Cambrian period, a key feature of ecosystems took shape. Various trophic levels where primary producers sustain herbivores, which then sustain predators, a system that has remained a core principle of life ever since. The intense evolutionary competitions between hunters and their targets, fueling much of today's biological creativity, originated in the Cambrian as the earliest music-eyed creature began preying on others, prompting those prey to develop protective strategies in response. As animals spread out and vied for resources, environments started dividing into specific ecological roles, with various species, music, adapting to unique diets, living spaces, or behaviors. A development that arose right then. Over those pivotal 55 million years, the foundational framework of a thriving ecosystem formed, complete with elaborate food chains and music, tangled relationships among organisms. Beyond the physical, the Cambrian laid down subtler yet vital elements, the genetic and developmental frameworks that enabled life to keep evolving and adjusting music across the ensuing hundreds of millions of years. Genes like Hox genes and other bodybuilding regulators had emerged prior to the Cambrian. Yet it was in this era that they were put to use in crafting a wide array of body designs, then honed by natural selection. The core processes for turning a lone fertilized egg into a sophisticated, multi-celled body with varied tissues and dedicated organs got refined during the Cambrian, and those same mechanisms still function today in familiar ways within contemporary creatures. As a human fetus grows, it goes through phases reminiscent of our distant chordate heritage, creating pharyngeal arches that hark back to music. The gill openings Cambrian chordates relied on for breathing and sifting food. The Cambrian's significance in science goes further than its place in life's timeline. It remains crucial for grasping how evolution unfolds. This explosion of forms proves that evolutionary pace varies greatly depending on conditions, featuring eras of slow change interrupted by surges of quick novelty and variety. Known at times as music-punctuated equilibrium, this dynamic appears across numerous lineages and timescales, indicating that the Cambrian's intense wave of transformation music isn't a rule-breaker, but an amplified instance of forces at work across life's entire span. Moreover, the Cambrian reveals that success in evolution hinges music on surrounding environments, that genetic differences neutral or harmful in one context can turn advantageous amid shifts, and that life's path relies on the order of happenings and specific environmental mixes that arise. Reflecting on nearly 500 million years of later music development, it's clear the Cambrian's groundwork upheld all that followed. The fish, swarming Devonian waters, built upon the music, simple chordate blueprint from the Cambrian. Early land dwellers in the Silurian and Devonian brought along body traits and survival skills passed down from music, their Cambrian forebears. The dinosaurs ruling land for 165 million years belonged to the vertebrate branch, tracing to the Cambrian seas. Mammals enduring the dinosaur wipeout and music, eventually spawning primates and humans, stem from that identical old chordate line. Today's sky-soaring birds derive from theropod dinosaurs, themselves from ancient reptiles, from initial tetrapods, from lobe-finned fish, from simpler fish, and ultimately from Cambrian's modest chordates. This unbroken link from the Cambrian to now turns those far-off breakthroughs and occurrences into more than past oddities. They're woven into our narrative. Gaze at your hand's 5 digits and grasping thumb, and you're viewing a design whose core form dates to when early fish crafted paired fins in the vast stretch of time post-Cambrian. The skeletal elements within those fins, later reshaped into tetrapod legs, then into wings, flippers, hooves, and hands, stem from the endoskeleton vertebrates first forged during that epoch of eyesight's rise. Drawing from the notochord's emergence in the Cambrian period, the eyes you use to scan these lines, music, originated from those early light-detecting structures in ancient chordates, gradually perfected across countless millions of years into astonishing visual tools capable of sensing individual photons and perceiving a vast spectrum of hues. The air you inhale flows into your lungs and seeps into your circulation, via breathing membranes that trace their lineage to the gill slits employed by Cambrian chordates for pulling oxygen from the ocean depths. Your neural network, featuring a spinal cord along your spine and an expanded front section that forms your mind, arose from the dorsal nerve cord, typical of the earliest chordates, enhanced and expanded to enable self-aware cognition, speech, logical deduction, and reflection on its own developmental history. Each element of your physical form, every bodily function, every growth sequence that constructs you from one cell, links back via a continuous lineage, music, to those basic aquatic swimmers that surfaced in Cambrian waters and endured sufficiently to pass on their hereditary material and structural blueprint across eons. The Cambrian era reveals how life, under suitable circumstances, probes every conceivable adaptation, devising music and testing fresh forms with an ingenuity that borders on intent, even as it stems purely from the blind mechanisms, music, of genetic mutation and survival pressures. It demonstrates that profound shifts in life's intricacy and variety can occur swiftly when various influences converge, when habitats encourage accelerated change, and the molecular tools exist to produce diversity in forms and survival tactics. It illustrates that evolutionary progress isn't steady or foreseeable, but episodic, stretches of gradual adjustment interrupted by bursts of profound upheaval. And it reminds us that we're woven into this dynamic, not detached witnesses beyond the stream of biological heritage, but integral elements within it. Offspring of that primordial burst that spawned trilobites, anomalocaris, and the array of bizarre yet marvelous beings preserved in music, sediments from 500 million years past. At its core, the Cambrian narrative is one of potential turning tangible, of latent opportunities, realized via the convergence of randomness, inevitability, music, and vast temporal scales. For 3 billion years, existence lingered in basic forms, barred from reaching the sophistication that its genetic and molecular foundations hinted at. Then, in a span that feels astonishingly short against the entirety of planetary time, a profound shift unfolded. Barriers lifted, opportunities surged forth, music, and the planet filled with vision, protective casings, neural webs, and the breakthroughs that would characterize animal existence ever after. The inhabitants of those Cambrian oceans have vanished, their delicate parts rotted away, their rigid components turned to stone. The waters they navigated have receded and reformed, receded once more as land masses shifted and tides fluctuated. The ranges framing those primordial seas have worn to powder, while fresh peaks have ascended elsewhere. Every particle on the planet's crust has music cycled through innumerable loops, traversing myriad life forms and earthly cycles. Yet the frameworks forged in the Cambrian, the structural designs, symbiotic interactions, and adaptive advances, born in that fleeting, extraordinary phase, endure. They envelop us. They mold the vibrant realm we occupy. They inscribe themselves in our very forms, in the architecture of our bones, the layout, music of our wiring, and the molecular makeup of the blood's oxygen-transporting hemoglobin. 541 million years stretches across immense durations, enough for land masses to unite and fracture repeatedly, for peaks' music to ascend and crumble, for cosmic impacts to scar the surface, glacial epochs to advance and retreat, and biotic communities, music to crumble and regenerate, enough for trilobites to rule the depths before waning and vanishing, for fishes to arise and claim the waves, for flora and fauna to venture ashore, for woodlands to blanket the land, for reptiles to ascend and music reign and tumble, for warm-blooded creatures to branch out, for tree-dwellers to evolve, for awareness to dawn, for a lineage to develop that could gaze backward over those epochs and reconstruct its ancestral tale. And still, amid all that duration, amid every alteration, the Cambrian echoes vividly in our reality. Its influence isn't confined to dusty exhibits or distant relics glimpsed only via fossils, models, and research articles. That influence thrives and pulses and shifts right here among us. You'll find it in the beetles, butterflies, and crabs, in the snails, clams, and octopuses, in the sea stars, sea urchins, fish, frogs, birds, and mammals. Every creature whose fundamental form took shape amid that long-ago burst of variety. Far beyond, marking the dawn of intricate animal forms, the Cambrian outburst laid the groundwork for the reality we inhabit today. It marked the instant when life's possibilities took tangible form, when the core framework of animal being was sketched, experimented with, and perfected. Drift off to sleep, assured that you're woven into an endless lineage of existence, reaching over 500 million years into the past, to an era when your forebears were tiny swimmers in primordial oceans. As vision awakened to behold the surroundings for the first time, as protective shells began to harden against emerging hunters, those designs etched in Cambrian waters echo within you too, in your genetic code, in your physical build, in the very unfolding from one cell into a whole being. You're an extension of that primordial tale, a vital link to an epoch that feels nearly legendary in its remoteness, yet echoes vividly in each inhalation, each pulse of your heart, each spark of awareness. From the Cambrian, we learn that existence is tough, imaginative, and boundlessly resourceful. That intricacy arises wherever the environment permits, that the bedrock from eons ago upholds all that follows. And we aren't detached observers of this sweeping march of life across history, but deeply intertwined with it. Beneficiaries of breakthroughs that surfaced when Earth was fresh and brimming with untapped promise. Rest easy, heir to those ancient waters. The surge that ignited 541 million years ago endures within you. Good night.